All right, so on here, just want to remind you of a few things. Some people are having difficulty graphing, trying to remember that. We've done it, but maybe it was a little while ago. But more so just on the translating part. So I recommended that you use D and R over here for your variables. It just helps to clarify. Okay, but before you get too wrapped up into, well, what's the inequality, how do you graph it, procedures, you want to stop and remember what it is you're actually trying to figure out. How will you know you have an answer? What information are you trying to figure out so that you know that you're done? Okay, so that's important. So you're not just doing one step, doing another step, and then you get a result, and you're like, well, I don't know if I'm finished, or people are asking me, well, is this right? It's like, well, you should already know when you get there, is this the right information that you're looking for? So keep in mind of all this, it's just like if someone hands you $40, say, here's $40, I need you to get at least 5 different arrangements. Okay? That's it. Those are the combinations. You can get 2 different kinds, and they each cost different amount, but as long as it doesn't cost over $40, and you get at least 5, that's 5 or more, you're good to go. So at the end, when I ask you what's one possible combination, okay, you need to make sure, well, this many roses, this many daisies, that doesn't cost more than $40, and you'll know how much each costs. It's in the question, and you got to make sure you get at least 5. Right? So from that standpoint, if you know that and you're thinking about that the whole problem, it becomes a lot easier. What's difficult is just trying to pull numbers out and to some way make inequalities without having a good sense of, well, what does it mean? So for instance here, if a daisy costs $4, right, how much does 2 daisies cost? And how much does 3 cost? $12. And how are you getting those numbers? You're multiplying 4 times how many I give you. So a good representation mathematically would be 4 times D. If it's only 1 daisy, it's 4 times 1. If it's 5 daisies, it's 4 times 5. So same thing for the roses. $8 times however many roses I get. So you should understand where these equations are coming from, not just saying, well, I know the last problem it kind of looked like this, so this problem I'll do the same thing, but there's a good reason for it. It's not magic. It's not made up by somebody and we're trying to get you just to copy it. Okay, so good thing to make sure you understand, why is it 4 times D, not 4 divided by D, or 4 plus D right here. We need to understand that. We've got to understand that if we want to spend at most $40, you have to understand the English language. At most means not more than or less than. So if you have $40, you can't spend 41. You can't spend 50. You only have $40. So mathematically, you have to spend less than or equal to $40. So that's a way of developing inequalities and equations in a way that makes sense. Another one was, well, you have to have at least 5 arrangements. You have to know, again, English language. At least means that many or more. Okay? So we have 5 or more arrangements. Arrangements of what? Arrangements of bouquets. What flowers are in the bouquets? Well, daisies and roses. So the number of daisies and number of roses in any combination has to be more than 5. So your daisies and your roses have to be more than 5. And you see how this is not like written in here. You have to infer from the rest of the problem, well, what it actually means. I need, more than 5. More than 5 what? Well, I have 2 types of roses. They have to add up to more than 5, right? So it's inferred. It should be added. And then when you go ahead and graph these, there's lots of different ways. You can solve for a variable and use slope y-intercept. You can use intercepts, which is what I recommend. Intercepts, whenever you have standard form, intercepts are usually pretty easy. Okay? So I have roses and daisies. So if I buy 0 roses, how many daisies can I afford with $40 exactly? So no roses, they're $4 a piece, I can afford 10. And then do the same thing but for the daisies. If I have 0 daisies, if I don't get any daisies, I'll go all roses, how many can I afford?
5.
Just 5, right? And then of course do the same thing with the second one. This one's a little bit easier. If I don't get any roses, how many daisies can I get? I have to get at least 5. If I don't get any daisies, I have to get at least 5 because we had to get 5 or more. And use these coordinates to go ahead and graph. You can see the biggest number is 10, so you know your scale, you only have to go up to 10 on your graph. That helps an awful lot to do both of them and know, like, well, the biggest number is 10. I just have to be able to count up to 10. So when I go down here, I know, okay, I can count by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If I had 20, I'd have to count by 2s or something like that. And I'm going to put roses down here, okay, on the horizontal axis. I'm going to put daisies up here on the vertical axis. Okay, let's help this out here. There we go. So I had my 2 equations, and I did the intercept. So let's graph the intercept. So 0 roses, 10 daisies. 0 roses, 10 daisies, way up here. And then 5 roses, 0 daisies. 5 roses, 0 daisies. So there's one equation. There's one of them. And this is, you can think about it as, this is the $40 equation. So we want everything below this line so that it's less than $40. So down here below, all these combinations, 2 roses, 1 daisy, that's less than $40. 1 rose, 5 daisies, that's less than $40. 3 roses and 4 daisies, that's exactly $40 since it's on the line. So this is why you're graphing it, is so you can see it, all the combinations. Instead of me just asking you, give me all the possibilities that are less than $40, and you just trying to figure them out by multiplying by 4 and multiplying by 8 and adding it up over and over and over. Here you can see all the combinations. Anything on the line costs exactly $40, and anything below the line is less than $40. So you can afford all these for $40. But there's the other condition here that says, well, we need to have at least 5. We want 5 or more. So 1 rose and 1 daisy won't work. And no roses, 2 daisies won't work. We need to have at least 5. So of all these, which ones are 5 or more? And that's your other line. So we have 0, 5, which is right here. So obviously if you get no roses and 5 daisies, that's going to be 5 or more. And if you do 5, 0, if you get all roses and no daisies, that's going to work as well. And follow that right here, and now you can see all the combinations that are exactly 5, and then everything above this will be 5 or more. So this is like the 5 arrangements, line arrangement. So we have to understand we have 2 restrictions. Has to be less than $40, but more than 5 arrangements. That's why we have 2 lines. So everything that's below the red line, the top line, that's less than 40, but it also has to be above the blue line because that's going to be 5 arrangements or more. So now we can see here are all the combinations of bouquets that work for work for both restrictions. Okay. And again, it can be on the line because it's okay. Now you notice I'm putting dots and I'm not shading. Usually with inequalities you shade, but we saw this when we were doing the in and out problems and all the other ones, that when you're buying items, you can't buy a fraction of a bouquet. You can't buy 3/10 of a rose. You can't buy 0.7 of a daisy. So we can only buy these nice whole numbers, 1/6, but nothing in between. So I'm putting dots instead of shading it. But if we're doing something that you can buy a fraction of, like gallons of gasoline, then you would be shading everything. So it just depends on the problem of when you shade, when you don't. Notice how, again, this depends on you understanding the question. Do you shade or put dots? You can't guess your way through it and just try to come up with some artificial rule of, well, I shade when I do this, and you just read the question and you have to figure out, and not using math, is it possible to buy a fraction of this? If yes, then you can shade. If no, like flowers, you can't buy half a flower, then you use the dots. Okay? That's about common sense as it gets. So now down here, it just asks you, okay, well, of the combinations. By the way, I mentioned before, how will you know when you're finished? You should know before you start that this is what you're looking for. You're going to be graphing two lines, and you're going to have to find out which ones are below my $40, which ones are above my 5 arrangements. And so when you have this, you know that these are the solutions. Okay, so when you go down to 3, and ask you, give me one possible combination, you know where to look on the graph. You know it can't be below here because that's less than 5. You know it couldn't be up here because that's going to cost more than $40. So you know that before you start, that this is what you're working towards. Two lines, below one, above the other, all those are going to be my answers. And then when you get here, just pick one of them, and then of course check on number 4, check what you picked algebraically. You can see that it works because it's in between the two lines, but then check algebraically, plug it into here, your first and second equation, make sure it's true for both. Okay. Any clarifications needed on this side? I've given you a lot of information, and you're going to need all this for the test. You're going to have to know that at most is less than or equal to. You'd be surprised how many people come up with some rule in their head that says, well, most, they don't want to read the whole problem. They'll say most, that one word, that's almost the word more. More, that's pretty similar to what greater than is. Okay, so this means greater than or equal to. So you're taking, if you try to take a word out of context of the problem, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, you have to understand at most $40, that means I can't spend $40. Or I can't spend more than $40, which means it has to be less than $40, or maybe exactly equal to $40. Make sense out of it. Don't try to come up with just arbitrary rules for solving math. Makes more sense this way. What else? The second one, very similar. Instead of roses and daisies, it's red plates and glow-in-the-dark plates. Instead of having at least 5 arrangements, they say at least 5 packages. So after seeing the front side and understanding it, not just going through the motions and just write down the answer and say, okay, now I have an answer, flip it over. If you understand the front, you will be able to do the back. So try the back on your own. Make sure you can do it on your own. And then you'll know, like, okay, I get this, I'm ready. I'm ready for the test. I'm ready to do the back side. So if you get stuck on the back, my prediction is you're not really doing the front side. You just wrote it down and said, look, I'm done. Oh, I don't get the back. It's the same problem. You can't say that I can't get the back if you can do the front. So we'll know by your questions of what you ask on the back if you really did the front and understand it, or if you just wrote it down and who knows. The only difference between your test next week and the quiz you took this week, the quiz was all the skills. You actually know the elimination, substitution, that kind of stuff. This is going to be the other part on your test. This is going to be worth the most amount of points. It's taking everything you learned and can you actually solve a real problem. Okay? That's very important that we learn this stuff, but that we actually know how to do something realistic with it, and it's not just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Up here, when you're done with both sides of both of these assignments, here's the review for the test. Okay, so you can come grab this, you can work on it. Some of you are in a position where you just need to get really good grade on this and then do well in the final and you'll be in good shape for the test. There's some people that like you're at that B plus, you want to get to an A minus. So I'm giving you a review a little bit early so you have the weekend to get ready.